Okay, let's see. How do I get my camera on? Can you hear me? There I am. Can you hear me?
Then we see
Excellent.
you.
You can hear me and see me. Excellent. Thank you for those who came ahead of me, Madam Chair, members of the task force. The good news is my colleagues have done such a good job, I can skip a lot of slides. But I'm kind of bringing home a different kind of perspective in terms of how I am seeing the relationship between the current mental health status of people of African descent here in America, African Americans, and American chattel slavery. There seems to be a difficulty for people to see that connection. I have a difficulty not seeing that connection. So part of this is going to really trying to bring home those connections. And the first thing I wanted to say is that there's a bit of mythology around the whole idea um, of slavery. So what happened after slavery officially ended? Well, the first thing that happened is it didn't. Okay, it was peonage, the unlawful selling of people back into slavery. And this lasted, of course, until 1945. Then after that, you had black codes, sundown laws, and exclusionary acts. So everybody was free, but you better not come here. And those sundown laws and sundown towns exist right now. Gina, Louisiana was one of those places when we heard about the Gina Six. And of course, that ended in 1867. Then you had the convict leasing. Well, we got to have a slave labor force. So this is where disproportionality happened. We want to know where that happened. How is it we disproportionately have all these black folks in prison? Well, they had to change the rules. And so now we're going to lease them out. In order to lease them, we have to hold them accountable for something. So now we're going to charge them things like vagrancy, startling a white woman, looking menacingly at a white woman. 15 years, 25% died under convict lease. Then following convict lease, we had Jim Crow, separate but equal. Well, it's always been separate. Matter of fact, it's still separate, but it's never been equal. Because everyone here knows wherever you are, where the hood is, right? And you know what defines the hood. You know when you cross that border and you stop seeing banks and you see check cashing places. You get my drift. So then we had, along with that Jim Crow segregation, we had anti-blackness and racial terrorism. We had lynchings, we had beatings, we had, well, everything we see today. And then we had the Civil Rights Act. Great. What continued was anti-blackness and racial terrorism. And from that, we have something called serial forced displacement, starting with slavery, being displaced from Africa, followed by, Jim Crow. And then we started naming it different things because that wasn't pleasant. It created cognitive dissonance. So people needed to get new names. So we called it redlining. It wasn't quite nice, but it wasn't as bad as some of the other stuff. And then after that, we said, well, urban renewal. And then it became curing urban blight. And now we have gentrification. That is serial forced displacement. Guess what the literature and data says happens when you displace people over and over again? It results in interpersonal and structural violence. So you break my leg and then you complain that I limp. Let's look at the second slide, actually. So when we start looking at slavery, and I'll be able to fold this in, we have people like Thomas Jefferson that make statements like Black people were, of course, physically unattractive, a little inconsistent with his behavior. We required less sleep. We were dumb. We were cowardly and incapable of feeling grief. Stay with me. He's saying that, 1800s, this is when these things are being said. And more importantly, he's saying it, which means now I'm going to export it to the rest of the world. So he exported anti-blackness and racism and dehumanization. But now let's fast forward. Those myths about who we are show up right now. This is a survey of 222 medical students and residents. And this is from publishings from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They showed half of them endorse at least one myth about physiological differences between Black people and white people, including that Black people's nerve endings, and this also goes back to J. Marion Sims. I'm not going to cover those slides because I'm sure you've heard a great deal about him, that Black people's nerve endings are less sensitive than white people's. And when asked to imagine how much pain white or Black patients experience in hypothetical situations, the medical students and residents insisted that Black people felt less pain. This made providers less likely to recommend appropriate treatment. So now we're seeing in contemporary society, this belief persists and it causes injury, mentally, emotionally, physically, to Black people. Next slide should be slide 12 or slide 11. Go to slide 11. I'm sorry. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so let's just start with this. Can you play this?
Yes, just one moment.
Okay. And what I want to say about this is when we start looking at the impact these things have on contemporary society, these beliefs, along with the idea that, our children, simply don't feel or experience on the same level as others.
Caught on camera, a 4-year-old little girl assaulted by a teacher who was supposed to be caring for her.
2 former employees at a local daycare are facing charges after being accused of mistreating the child. Local 12's Jenna Cisneros joins us live in Fairfield outside Wild Kingdom Early Learning Center. Jenna, first off, how is the little girl?
Yeah, I spoke with the mother of the little girl, and thankfully she's been doing well. Her mom says that she is nonverbal, and staff describes her as a gentle soul who wouldn't hurt anybody. The director says as soon as she heard that little girl's cry, she says her motherly instinct came to life, and she knew something was immediately wrong.
Good morning to you, good morning to you.
What appears to be a seemingly normal start for this preschool classroom quickly turned chaotic.
Get out of here.
Former teacher James Cialino had been watching 10 kids in his class back in June when a 4-year-old girl left the room with another class. Jennifer Miller, the teacher of the other class, brings the child back into Cialino's classroom, and then he pushes her to the ground. Miller watched it all happen and proceeds to shut the door and leave.
The video itself has all the truth it needs in it. So as soon as you watch that or as soon as you see that, you know immediately what has to be done.
Director Lisa McMillian says a third teacher, seen in the red shirt, came into the classroom after the little girl got pushed to the ground. That teacher was not involved in this incident. Cialino then took the little girl to McMillian's office.
You just know something is not right with that cry. As a mom, you know when something is not right. As a director, I know all of those children and I know how they cry.
McMillian says she immediately pulled the surveillance video, fired the 2 teachers, reported the incident to police as well as the little girl's family.
What the hell is this? I cried. I couldn't hold it. It was so heartbroken.
3 months later, the family.
Okay, so what's important here, and again, it's pretty straightforward, but at the same time, what we're looking at, this is 2021. Okay, so I'm wondering right now, what didn't the cameras catch? What is going on and what is happening? Now, there's a slide. I want you to pull the slide up on stress in children and learning. I think we have the wrong slides, but no, it's actually stress. It's the name of it is stress in children. Okay, that's okay. I will, I had 2. No, that's okay. That's all right. Just stay right there. I have the slide over here. I will read it. Stress and learning. And I want to say this because we need to appreciate the implications of institutionalized and continuing perpetual racism that started with dehumanizing us on the front end. The remarkable growth and development of the neural cortex during the earliest years of life can only occur when a child feels emotionally secure and warm, stable relationships. When young children are stressed, fearful, or insecure, the limbic emotional area of the brain actually prevents learning from occurring. Stress. Here we're looking at a 4-year-old that is nonverbal, that cannot even defend herself, even if she was able to. And, there's this idea that, again, just send them on in. We know that based on a 2016 study from the Yale Child Study Center, we know that they looked at, 136 teachers, and they had these preschool teachers look at a classroom and determine whether or not there were potential problems. Well, of course, the actual reality was there were no problems in this classroom. But instead of watching the teachers what buttons they push, they watched the trajectory of their gaze to determine who they looked at when they thought there was going to be a problem. And predictably, just as we see the explosion of 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds, they looked at black boys. They looked at them more. And even when 2 children were off task and there was a white child, a black child, they didn't see the white child. They saw the black child. Now, next slide. And this next presentation, I think, is just a picture of a classroom. You might have heard of this. Again, 2021. This is in Roswell, Georgia. And I want to unpack this for you developmentally, what's going on in this room. First of all the children in this room are innocent. What these parents captured when they decided to look in at their children, they noticed when they looked in to see what their child was doing, that all the white children have food in front of them and none of the black children do. So there's learning going on here. The learning for the white children is that we're special. We don't quite know why, but we know we're more special than them. Now, what's interesting about this this captured picture, which went viral, is that none of the children told their parents. Now, let's get into the psyche of the black children and to determine what's going on in their little minds as we see them harmed in this way. Okay, so what happens is a child internalizes shame, fear, guilt. We're bad. None of this is articulated, not even to their parents, but it's internalized. And then we want to know why Johnny can't read. And so for me, what I do, Joy DeGruy Publications, and with the models that I've written, all the things that you heard, is I put into the hands of parents data. So here's what I don't do. What every black parent does is they take their little kids, they send them into the classroom, and they hope you're not going to hurt them. They hope that they're not going to do to you what they did to me. Like my high school guidance counselor told me I wasn't college material, middle-aged white woman. Didn't bother me or my family, but I can imagine how many other people she poisoned through her career. But she gets to be in these institutions where she does harm. So when I tell parents, when you send them in the classroom, I don't send them in hope, because I got skin in the game. So I go to my grandchildren's schools. I will train for free. But one of the things that I do with each classroom, and I walk in and there is a white teacher that is teaching my grandson or my granddaughter, I'm going to say, hello. I want to know what you're going to do to mitigate any potential harm as a result of implicit bias. And they may respond to me by going, oh, what do you mean? Well, here's some data. Want you to have that. Now that you've read it, I need to know what you're going to do to mitigate. Well, I'm not a racist. Here's some more data. You might not know. But what I have to do is lean into the direction of the most vulnerable. And I have to say, you being a nice person has nothing to do with this. I have 300 years of history. So there's 2 things that reparations needs to do, and it's been stated already. First is you got to stop breaking my leg if you expect me to heal from the injury. And 2, we have to build and create an environment so our children don't have to come home every day and say, my teacher doesn't like me. And like I said, there's what's caught on film, and then there's what we don't see. And so, there's an African proverb, and the African proverb says, when you pray, go ahead and pray, because we should pray, but move your feet. There has to be accountability, there has to be action, there has to be protection of the most vulnerable among us. And that's not happening. And these systems, again, I'm not talking about what happened way back there, but you see, this is fueled by every major institution in America. At its foundation is white supremacy. I don't care if you're an architect, I don't care if you're a doctor, I don't care if you're a psychologist. What has been breastfed into American systems is white supremacy. We cannot pretend we don't know that. We cannot send our children, our youth, our men, our women, our girls. We cannot send them out into a world that is hostile with no armor. And so part of what my work is about is giving people the language, learning to lean in, learning that when your stomach is in knots, when you walk into the school to support your children, I help them understand where those knots came from. And I want to show this last film, and then I will wrap up. There should be actually one more. It's kind of strange little.
The daycare worker under arrest in Pennsylvania. Difficult video allegedly showing her push a 4-year-old girl down a flight of stairs. Authorities say she then notices the camera above her. Here's ABC's Lindsay Janis.
This disturbing video shows a 4-year-old girl apparently being shoved down the stairs at a Philadelphia area daycare. The worker then appears to notice the camera. At that point, she holds the little girl's hand and walks her down the remaining steps.
The little girl, she just was really shaken up. She was just like, and I'm like, her eyes literally were like, help me.
That daycare manager happened to be watching on a new camera that had just been installed a half hour earlier.
So I went and confronted her at the bottom of the stairs. What are you doing? We don't do this to children.
The little girl wasn't seriously injured, but the daycare worker, Sarah Gable, was immediately fired.
You can stop the video. So again, I want to close by saying, when we start looking at how we make things right, this is not optional for me. Okay, this is not optional. People can't see the connection. Again, I say I cannot not see the connection. When we start looking at stress, remember, stress inhibits the ability to learn. Someone else talked about cortisol. So these are things that we need to lean into as people, as human beings, if we expect change to happen. And change is going to happen when we insist upon it and we put laws behind it. So I'm 100% for and to and with reparations, because we need to repair mentally, emotionally, and spiritually in order to change the trajectory for our children. Thank you so much.